Welcome to Leader Training Session 2, Student Ministry Practice. In this session, we're going to talk about what we need every youth leader to do during youth programs and events to help students become fully integrated members of the body of Christ. Let's start with where we want to go as a student ministry. If we have a destination in mind, then we can plan our steps to actually get there. As a student ministry, we have two destinations in mind. Our first destination is that we want to be known as the friendliest youth group around. This flows directly from several of our student ministry distinctives. We want to be a safe place for students to work out their identity, who they are, and who they're becoming in Christ. We want to be a place where every student feels like they belong. We want to be like a family where students are being adopted into a caring network of people who love, embrace, support, and celebrate them. And we want to have a positive atmosphere where students are loved and accepted based on who they are and not just for what they can do. Teens need to feel like they belong to a community before they will adopt their values and beliefs. Yet oftentimes, youth groups project a message that you have to behave like us before you can belong to us. This perceived message could turn teens away from a relationship with Jesus that has the power to transform their lives. What if instead the core leaders and students in our group each took it upon themselves to go out of their way to show and tell everyone that shows up for youth group that they are loved and accepted based solely on the fact that they are here? That it doesn't matter how cool or uncool you look, or how much like us or unlike us you seem, or how you're dressed, or how much money it looks like your family has, or which part of the county I think you're from, or anything else. The only thing that matters to me is that you are here. And because you're here, you belong. And I'm going to go out of my way to say hi to you, to introduce myself, to introduce you to my friends, to invite you to play basketball with me, or eat with me, or sit with me. And I'm not just going to do it the first week you show up and the second week, but every week you come for as long as it takes for you to feel in your heart that you belong here too. I'm committed to you, and I put you on myself with God's help. This culture shift alone has the power to change lives, but it is not easy. Having the friendliest youth group around will not just happen. Visitors at our events and fringe students and core students who are going through a rough season are not going to feel loved if the rest of us sit passively by assuming that someone else is going to reach out to them. In order to get to our destination during youth meetings, we need to keep aware of students who need connection. We need to walk up to those students. We need to talk with them. We need to show interest in them. We need to encourage them with words and actions. And we need to tell them in a way that they'll receive, "I love you, we're here for you, and you belong here." Sadly, we will all tend towards complacency during youth programs and events, to stay in our comfort zones and friendship circles, to not talk or hang out with disconnected students and help them belong. To help us all understand how important it is to take the initiative to approach students and specifically make them feel connected, let's take a look at a youth group where all the core students and youth leaders are just going with the flow. For context, this video follows a new student who's been dropped off at youth group. He doesn't know anyone, and no one goes out of their way to connect with him. You will note that this is a very typical youth group, much like our own. There are no mean youth leaders or students, but I want you to put yourself in the shoes of this young man as he wanders the room. What do you think he's thinking? How do you think he feels?
Love Brian. He's nice. He's got nice hair. We're just grateful that Brian shared a little bit. And here's the deal. Tonight at our overtime, we're going to have 2 overtimes in a row. And they're going to be tonight and then next Sunday night with our hayride, which costs $4 but free to anybody that you bring. So some scripture to kind of like help that.
This youth group probably thinks that they're a friendly youth group. All the regular students are laughing and hanging out and having fun, but they are not a friendly youth group. This is probably the worst experience this student has had in a long time. His feeling of rejection must have been so painful. I doubt he will ever go back to that youth group again unless his parents force him to. Here's the deal. Being an unfriendly youth group takes no effort at all. When the core students and youth leaders just go with the flow of the night, youth programs and events are unfriendly by default. Being a friendly youth group, on the other hand, takes awareness for disconnected teens. It takes initiative. It takes effort. It takes specific words and actions of every youth leader every week to make youth group friendly for everyone. We will know we are arriving at our destination of being a friendly youth group when everyone who comes through our doors feels loved, safe, and accepted based solely on the fact that they are there. When kids feel so welcome when they're at youth programs and events, they come because they want to, even if they have a dozen other things they could be doing that night. And we'll know we're arriving at our destination when they invite their friends to come out of a sense of pride and belonging in their youth group, not because of obligation. By consistently putting in the effort every week and creating this culture shift, we can become known as the friendliest youth group around. The second destination we have as a student ministry is that we want to be a training ground for students who want to live out their faith. We want our students to become fully equipped in every way to reach their peers with the gospel and successfully transfer their faith to emerging generations. This also flows from several of our student ministry distinctives. We want our students to feel a deep connection to God's purpose and calling on their lives. We want to give students opportunities to encounter the presence of Jesus so they can grow spiritually. And we want to empower them in the gifts and abilities God has given them, to help them discover what they're good at, both in life skills and ministry, and give them real opportunities to practice and develop them. We'll know we're arriving at our destination of being a training ground when the following are happening. When students feel a sense of ownership of the student ministry, that they have a voice, that who they are, their passions, abilities, and identities shape who we are, where we're going as a youth group. When students sense that they are part of something bigger than themselves, that they are part of God's grand, sweeping narrative of history, that they have a part to play in that story, that God is the main character and yet is still intimately involved in their story. And when students feel like things like obeying the Great Commandment and the Great Commission aren't reserved for super Christians or pastors or youth leaders, but are just a normal part of their lives, that knowing the gospel, living the gospel, and sharing the gospel is something that just overflows naturally from their lives. By the time our students graduate, it should be normal for them to have led a Bible study or a small group discussion, or led worship, or taught a lesson, or been involved in creative arts, or learned how to run lights and sound during youth group. In every way, we want to empower students to live out the mission and principles of He's Alive Church. They are capable, and we can teach them. We want to be a training ground for ministry, and we want to be the friendliest youth ministry around. That's where we want to go, and here are some steps that we can take in order to get there. How we get there, what we do in student ministry. Here are some mindsets and actions that every youth leader needs to bring into every youth program and event. Let's begin with the 7 mindsets of a good youth leader. Mindset number 1 is inflow overflow. This simply means that every youth leader needs to be deeply rooted in their personal relationship with Jesus. In John 15:5, Jesus says, "I am the vine, you are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing." Ministry is all about producing spiritual fruit that will last. That is impossible to do on our own. Only God can do it. We have to stay relationally connected to Jesus as our spiritual life source if we are ever going to produce spiritual life in students. This is what is meant by inflow. As youth leaders, we need to make time for Jesus to remain relationally connected to Him every single day. A daily devotional life of scripture reading and meditating, prayer, worship, solitude, and other spiritual disciplines are ways of allowing Jesus to inflow spiritual life into us. When we are filled with Him, we can then overflow that spiritual life into others. Real ministry comes from the overflow of our time spent with Jesus. If there is no overflow, there is no real ministry. As youth leaders, let's embrace the inflow-overflow of daily time spent with Jesus that leads to genuine ministry with students. The second mindset is positivity. We need to be positive youth leaders. We all have different personalities, and while we all don't need to be a bubbly ray of sunshine all the time, a general mindset of positivity means everything to students and can set the tone for our youth group as a whole. So make a conscious effort to smile while you're greeting and talking with students. Celebrate their presence with a high five, fist bump, or hug. Find ways to laugh with them without using sarcastic jokes at theirs or others' expense. Avoid complaining in front of students and help redirect their complaints by focusing on the positive. The truth is, negative leaders can wipe out youth ministries, and so I'll be pretty protective of this. The third mindset is to be a shepherd, not a chaperone. As a general rule, we don't have chaperones at He's Alive students' programs and events. We have youth leaders, we have shepherds. And here's the difference. Chaperones tend to stay out of the way of students until they see bad behavior, then they step in and stop it. Shepherds, on the other hand, are involved with the students because they love and care for them. This gives them the relational capital and trust to influence students' decisions and faith. Listen to what 1 Thessalonians 2:8 says about this mindset. "So we cared for you. Because we loved you so much, we were delighted to share with you not only the gospel of God, but our lives as well." He's Alive youth leaders are shepherds, not chaperones. They are caring, loving, and involved adults that make a spiritual impact on the students they serve. The fourth mindset is to be caring. Students don't need cool youth leaders, they just need caring youth leaders. Some youth leaders may worry about whether or not they can relate with students or if students will like them or think they're cool. Trust me, this is not something that you need to worry about. Students really want adults that they know like them and will be there for them. So before we start listening to their music or trying to use the newest teen phrases or going out and buying designer jeans for your revamped youth group wardrobe, try just being yourself. Just the kindest, caringest version of yourself. Students don't need cool, they just need caring. The fifth mindset is to be an ugly frog kisser. Now you're familiar with the story of the princess and the frog. The frog was really a prince, and the princess had the presence of mind to see past the frog's ugly exterior and recognize his value on the inside. Every student ministry has similar frogs. We're talking about those students. The ones where you're a little relieved when you find out they can't make it to your small group that night. They might be annoying, they might be smelly, they might have some behavior issues, they might have trouble staying on topic, they might be overly dramatic, they might be a combination of all those things. A good youth leader is an ugly frog kisser. In other words, they have the sensitivity and the compassion and the patience to see past a student's tough exterior and value the person on the inside. Sometimes love and attention over time is all a teen needs to blossom and mature into the person God created them to be. The sixth mindset is to be a youth pastor. That's right, I'm giving my title away to every youth leader. And here's what I mean by that. Research has shown that every teen needs the involvement of at least 5 caring, non-parental adults in order to build a genuine and lasting faith. This is why we build a large youth ministry team. This is why we have lots of youth leaders at every youth program and event. It's because we want every student to have multiple youth leaders pouring into their lives. If the only adult a student has in their life impacting their faith is their youth pastor or their small group leader, it will be difficult for them to grow. That's why we recognize that the most effective youth pastor for building lifelong faith in teens is actually a whole network of caring adults. We collectively are the youth pastor of He's Life students. As a youth leader, embrace that title and recognize the power that God has given you to influence the faith of your students. Recognize that on nights when there are lots of other youth leaders and you don't feel like you have something specific to do and you don't feel quote unquote needed that night, remember that you are there to do something specific. You are needed to be one of those 5 caring adults in the life of a student that helps them produce lifelong faith. The 7th mindset every youth leader needs to bring into every youth program and event is to understand that you are a practical theologian. Everyone is a practical theologian. In other words, everyone believes something about God. Even atheists, for example, have a belief that God isn't real. And what a person believes about God affects the way they live their lives. Everything a person thinks, says, and does is a reflection of what they believe to be true about God. This means that everything you say and do in youth ministry matters. Students are looking up to you. They're taking cues for their own faith from you. They notice the things you say and do. Sometimes they also notice the things you don't say and don't do. So understand that you're a practical theologian and you are influencing the theology of your students. Be mindful of what you do around students. Take care in the way that you say and address things. Those things reveal what you believe to be true about God, and students will pick up on that from you. I'll give you a quick example of what I mean by this. One time I was sitting at a table of middle school and high school boys during some downtime during Christmas in the city. At one point, they all started joking with each other about using pornography, and I realized at that moment that they were revealing their theology. They either didn't know or didn't believe that Jesus has called his followers to be above reproach when it comes to sexual sin. So I had a choice to make. I could either not address it and let the guys assume their view of God was right, or worse, by my silence say that I agree with them, or I could say something and help them course correct. I decided to say something. I said, guys, you know that pornography isn't a neutral pastime like watching a movie or listening to music, right? Like, it will damage your mentality towards sex and women, because the Bible says that it can actually damage your spiritual life as well. And that's it. I left it at that. No judgment, no threats to tell their parents, just a quick drive-by truth-telling to help get them back on track. As youth leaders, we are practical theologians. Everything we say and do in student ministry matters. So take care and be intentional about your words and actions around students. Bringing these 7 mindsets into every youth program and event will serve you well and unleash you to be great youth leaders that influence the faith of students. Now let's talk about what we need every youth leader to do at every youth event. These are the 11 practices of student ministry. The first thing you need to do as a youth leader is to always focus on the person. As youth leaders, we are at youth programs and events for one primary reason: the students. We are there to spend time with, talk with, and spiritually influence students. Because of this, youth group begins when the first student walks in the door and it ends when the last student leaves, as opposed to the official start and end times on the schedule. As long as students are present with us, they need to be our focus. And I know that it can be easy to catch up with other adult youth leaders during youth, but youth programs and events isn't the time for hanging out with our adult friends from church. Our attention needs to be turned towards students, not other adult leaders. Also, for those of us who are more task-oriented instead of people-oriented, it can be easy for us to get caught up just doing a lot of stuff. Instead of interacting with students, we get preoccupied with rearranging chairs or setting up snacks for youth setup, or getting out the broom and taking out the trash for teardown. Setup can be done early, and teardown can wait until after students leave. As long as students are present with us, we need to always focus on the person. The second thing you need to do as youth leaders is remember the little things. Little things are a big deal to students. We're talking about small acts of love and affection we show students primarily outside of an official youth program or events. Things like handwritten notes or cards sent in the mail, calling them or FaceTiming them, inviting them to spend time with you in a shared hobby, project, or errand, sending them a text or an email, attending one of their games or performances, or remembering something significant like their birthday. The little things you do for students outside of an official youth setting can be even more important to your students' faith development than the things you do within them. In fact, it is likely that you will never have an effective ministry with your students in youth group if you don't remember to do the little things with them. In order to have an impact on students, they have to know you care about them. This will be one of the main points in session 3 when we talk about how to lead better small groups. The third thing you need to do at every youth event is provide great experiences for students. GREAT is an acrostic we use to make sure every student feels welcomed at youth programs and events and that no one falls through the cracks. G stands for greet. Greet as many students as you can. Now, you might not be a social butterfly all the time, but at youth events and programs, you will need to at least say hi to most of the students by the end of the night. The goal is to greet as many students as you can. That means students you know well and students you don't know well, and especially students you have never seen before. That means they are probably a visitor. They definitely need to be greeted. R stands for remember names. It is difficult for students to feel known, loved, and part of the group if no one knows their name. And I know that remembering names is easier for some of us than others, but we all need to make an effort to remember students' names. A great way to remember someone's name is to repeat it several times in your head when you first learn it, and then work saying their name out loud into your conversation with them. Name tags will help you out some of the time, but you can't always depend on students wearing them, or even wearing their own name tag for that matter, to help you remember their name. E stands for eye contact. When you're talking with and hanging out with students, try to maintain appropriate eye contact with them. Eye contact communicates that you care, it shows that you're interested in who they are and what they have to say. Eye contact allows you to stay present in the moment and not start thinking about what you're going to say next or what you need to do later in the week and miss what the student is saying. Eye contact goes a long way with students. A stands for affirmation, which is just another word for encouragement. Have a radar for meaningful compliments for students and other leaders. If someone does well in an activity, sport, or game, then let them know. If they sang in worship or led a prayer or asked a really good question in small group, tell them good job. Generally be positive towards everyone. Have good sportsmanship during games. Avoid any name calling or sarcasm. And be careful with nicknames and make sure that students actually enjoy being called that. Let's be affirming youth leaders. Finally, T stands for touch. And in this day and age, we have to clarify that we mean appropriate touch. But depending on your relationship with a student, that could be a high five, fist bump, a secret handshake, or even a hug. Appropriate touch could be the primary love language of some of your students and a great way to help them feel like they belong. If you ever wonder what you're supposed to be doing at a youth program or event, just remember to provide students with great experiences. Greet them, remember their name, make eye contact when you're talking with them, affirm them with encouraging words, and touch them with a high five, fist bump, or hug appropriate to your relationship with them. A card with a great experience acrostic is included in your youth leader resource manual. Put it in your purse or wallet so that anytime you're at a youth program or event and you find yourself wondering, I wonder what Stephen wants me to be doing right now. You can take that card out and remember that you are there to provide students with great experiences. The fourth thing you need to do at every youth event is to have safe conversations with teens. SAFE is another acrostic we use to help you have conversations with any student regardless of how well you know them. Now, your job description as a youth leader is to walk across the room and start a conversation with a student. And I realize that some of us are more natural conversation starters than others, so we came up with a SAFE conversations acrostic. We spell it with 2 F's so that we always have 5 surefire conversation starters that we can use to walk up to any student and have a conversation with them. S stands for school. You can always ask students which school they go to, what grade they're in, and what their favorite subjects are. In the case of new students, once I find out what school they go to, I often try to point out other students that go to the same school and ask if they recognize anyone else there. A stands for activities. A lot of students open up right away if you get them talking about something they love to do. So ask them if they play any sports or instruments, have any hobbies, or are involved in any clubs or organizations. This may be a great way to find out if you have anything in common with them. And if you do, well, the rest of the conversation will take care of itself. The first F stands for family. You can ask them if they have any brothers or sisters. You can ask them what birth order they are, like oldest, youngest, or middle child. You can ask them if they get along or not. Family is usually a pretty comfortable subject for new people to talk about. It can also help you get a better idea of their family structure, which can sometimes be helpful for you to know and minister better to that student as a youth leader. The second F stands for friends. And I often ask students what sort of things they like doing with their friends and what kind of friends they like hanging out with. This can lead to lots of other subjects to talk about, such as other interests or experiences they've had. It also might help you pair them up with similar students in the youth group, people they might have something in common with. If a student is new, I'll often ask them if they came with a friend or if they recognize anyone there. Sometimes just one familiar face is all that's needed to help a visiting student feel at ease. Finally, E stands for entertainment. You can ask them what their favorite movie is or what was the last movie they saw in a theater. You can ask them what kind of music they like to listen to and who their favorite artist is. You can ask them what their favorite TV show is or what they're watching on Netflix right now or what video games they play or if they've seen any funny memes lately. Entertainment is a great and easy way to get students talking, especially if you enjoy consuming entertainment yourself. School, activities, family, friends, and entertainment are all safe conversation topics that you can have with any student. One thing you want to be careful of as you're having safe conversations is to not evaluate or judge a student's responses to your questions. Our goal is not to evaluate a student's responses, but to just be interested. So look them in the eyes you're talking with them, care about what they're saying, and look for things you have in common. Just start working through the SAFE acrostic and see where the conversation takes you. Remember, our job description as youth leaders is to walk across the room and start a conversation with a student. If you're ever at a youth event and you don't know what you should be doing or don't know why I asked you to be there, just rewind to this moment in your head and remember that your job description is to walk across the room and start a conversation with a student. Students need a network of 5 or more caring adults in their lives to build an important lifelong faith. That's why we have a large youth leader team, and that's why we try to have lots of youth leaders at every youth program and event. Because there are a lot of adults there on any given night, it might not feel like you've been given anything specific to do. And if you ever feel that way, then I want you to remember you are there to provide students with great experiences and to walk across the room and start a conversation with a student. You are there for a purpose. You are there to be one of those 5 adults to a student. You are there to help a student build a lifelong faith. And it all begins with providing great experiences and having safe conversations. So just walk across the room and start a conversation with a student. The 5th thing you need to do is have spiritual conversations. As you get to know your students more and develop relational capital and influence with them, you're going to build the trust needed to go deeper in your conversations. As youth leaders, have the courage to go there. As you're talking with students, find ways to weave the gospel and your faith into your conversations. Talk about your testimony and the events that God used in your life to bring you into a relationship with Him. Talk about some of the big moments in your life that God used to grow your faith. Talk about what it means for you to be a follower of Jesus and how that specifically plays out in the way that you serve the community, minister to the church, and reach out to the lost in your life. And have the courage to ask them about their faith. Ask them about their spiritual journey and how they became a Christian. Ask them what they think it means to follow Jesus. Ask them what they enjoy the most about church or about youth group or why they think it's important to stay involved. Ask them what they think they're good at and how they see themselves being used by God for ministry. In all your interactions with students, look for natural ways to weave the gospel and the faith into your conversations with them. Have spiritual conversations. The sixth thing you need to do is to lead students from where they are, not where you expect them to be. Remember that teens are hurt by a performance-based society that values them more for what they can do than for who they are. The last thing our students need is for youth leaders to heap additional expectations upon them to have a fully mature faith when they are still kids in some ways. Remember what it was like for you to be a teen. Maybe get out your old yearbooks or photo albums and try to relive some of the memories of your teenage past. Try to identify with your students. Put yourself in their shoes. Middle schoolers are going to be immature. High schoolers are going to be inconsistent. Adolescence is a phase of life that everyone has to go through, and sometimes the most helpful thing we can do as youth leaders is embrace our students within that phase, to love them for who they are and where they're at, and encourage them to move towards the person they're becoming. To not get shocked when they take a step or two back in the faith, to simply cheer them on for every step forward. Lead students from where they are, not where you expect them to be. If you find yourself struggling with being overly critical of a student's attitude or decisions or overall spiritual maturity, it might be a sign that you're expecting too much from them. It's necessary to offer a lot of patience and grace in student ministry. So lead them from where they are, not where you expect them to be. The seventh thing you need to do is watch for students' shields. Many students put up shields to guard themselves from adults they don't fully trust yet. It could be a cynicism shield or a distrust shield or an I'm just too cool for this shield. But shields are attitudes that teens put up to keep you from getting too deeply into their worlds. Now, shields are much more common for high schoolers than for middle school students, and this is why. Middle schoolers ask adults one essential question when deciding if they'll let you influence them or not. Their essential question is, do you like me? If they feel like the answer to that is yes, then they will let you into their world. So if you genuinely love and like middle school students, then you're likely going to make an impact in their lives and faith. In high school, however, the question changes to, do I like you? And if the answer to that is no, then you're going to get a shield from them. As youth leaders, we need to be aware of students' shields and just keep patiently pursuing those teens who have them. For some, they may never put their shield down, and we should never force them to. But for others, a patient, caring youth leader who gently works their way around a student's shield can make a difference in their world. The eighth thing youth leaders need to do is stop clumping. What is clumping? Well, clumping is the tendency for youth leaders to hang out with each other while youth group is going on. This takes their focus away from what they're there for, the students. Clumping leads to students getting ignored, missing out on great experiences, and for a youth group to become unfriendly. Now, I know other youth leaders are your friends. I know hanging out with them is your comfort zone. But when students are present, it needs to go from your agenda to the students' agenda, and from your comfort zone to their comfort zone. During youth events and programs, we really need for there to be no more than two adults hanging out amongst themselves. Please don't clump with each other. Keep your focus and interactions with the students. The ninth thing youth leaders need to do is fight the parent voice. Remember, one of our student ministry distinctives is positivity. We need positive youth leaders. The parent voice is anytime you lose your patience with a student and become short with them, yell at them, or lecture them. If you find yourself becoming really frustrated with a student, take that as a sign to talk to another youth leader, let them know what's going on, pass that student off to them for a while, and take a moment to cool off. We need youth leaders who are able to set boundaries with students in a positive way. Now, we do have guidelines and boundaries as a student ministry for students to follow, and we do expect students to maintain them. But as long as respect and safety and morals and other people's experience during events aren't in jeopardy, weigh whether you really need to take a hard line with a student. One thing I like to mention here is that student ministry isn't for everyone. Youth leaders need to be able to handle a reasonable amount of chaos, to be flexible, and to be able to get off schedule and go with the flow at times. And if you aren't able to do that, that's nothing negative on you. In fact, I totally get it. But there are lots of ways to get involved at He's Alive Church that might be a better fit for you than youth ministry. Negative leaders can wipe out student ministries, so I'm generally pretty protective about this. Fight the parent voice by being able to offer students a fair balance of grace and truth. The 10th thing youth leaders need to do is take redirection in a positive way. In some ways, youth ministry can be counterintuitive, and sometimes it can be really hard. We will all try our best and really care and still have something not work out the way that we thought it would, or be asked to do something differently. When this happens, it can be easy to take redirection really personally, especially when you're going out on a limb and putting all your heart and soul into something only to have it not work out quite right. The only thing you need to have here is the ability to respond to redirection in a positive way. Don't take redirection personally. We're all just trying to get better and to influence the faith of students. The 11th thing youth leaders need to do is believe in the significance of the insignificant. Most of the things we do in student ministry is not a big deal. In many ways, we are boringly ordinary. There's nothing brilliant about the great experiences or the safe conversations or being one of the 5 adults that builds a student's faith. Years from now, when we find out what we did that made the greatest impact in the life of a student, we're going to think to ourselves, really? So keep believing in the significant of the insignificant. Keep doing the little things. Keep writing notes to students. Keep looking them in the eye when you're talking with them. Keep attending their events. Keep being a really big friend to a student. The truth is, God turns these insignificant things into supernaturally significant things. With God, 2 + 2 = 100. And that's really all there is to it. We have a destination to be the friendliest youth ministry around and to be a training ground for students in ministry. We have a few mindsets and a few practices to get us there. I believe that if you are willing to allow yourself to be used by God to do a few ordinary things that He's called us all to do, then He can do the extraordinary through you. He can spiritually transform students. He can build in them an important lifelong faith, and He can bring life to dead places. I'm looking forward to seeing what God does in and through you this year as you allow His life in you to overflow into the lives of students around you. In our next session, we'll learn how to lead better small groups.